Ladies and gentlemen, it's no secret that the coronavirus pandemic has been terrible for many people. But for the world of chess, there actually were some positives over the past few years. Obviously, chess became more popular with people locked inside, and in reality, there was also the Queen's Gambit that came out in late 2020. So for many of us in the chess world, the last 2 to 3 years ended up being more positive in many ways than negative. But this video is to shine some light on one particular grandmaster at the very top who has gone under the radar as chess has absolutely exploded, and that grandmaster is Ding Liren. Now, this video, I'm going to kind of split it into two parts. This opening monologue will go for a little bit, like 2-3 minutes, and then I'm going to show you some of his games. So, Ding Liren is the third-ranked chess player in the world. He was second, he was third, he bounced around a little bit with a rating of 2799. Hey, look, somebody subscribed. This is so funny. Somebody subscribed while I'm not even streaming. Amazing. Ding Liren from China was in the candidates tournament in 2020, and he had a really rough first half before the tournament got canceled because the first 7 of the 14 rounds did occur right when the pandemic exploded, right? So it was already a very difficult time, and he had one of the worst performances of his career. In 2019, he had one of the best years of his career. His rating was 2805. And we're actually going to cover some of his games in this video when he won the Singfield Cup. He was the #1 finisher of the Grand Chess Tour. And 2020, obviously, was a terrible year for him. And he was kind of screwed on many fronts. When the candidates tournament resumed in 2021, he actually won his last 3 rounds. He dusted off some of the cobwebs. And he won on a really high note. But 2021, 2022 has been a nightmare for Ding Liren. First of all, he's been completely unable to play at a best level in all the Meltwater and all the online tour. There was this whole online tour. There will continue to be an online tour. But Ding is on a completely different time zone than every other grandmaster playing. So he's frequently up at 4 in the morning participating in these things. Obviously, it's not going to go very well. And Ding also was screwed over by the fact that FIDE changed the regulations for qualifying to the candidates tournament. So what that means is they used to take the highest rated player eligible to qualify. They removed that. So Ding cannot qualify for the candidates by rating. He also was unable to travel to play in the World Cup. He also was unable to travel to play in the Grand Swiss. And the entire purpose of this video is the recent news that broke that Ding Liren was unable to get a visa to travel to Berlin and play in the Grand Prix. The Grand Prix is a series of 3 tournaments, of which people are eligible to participate in 2, and the top 2 finishers are able to qualify for the candidates. That was his last hope. If Ding Liren doesn't make it to the candidates in 2022, he probably will not be eligible to play a World Championship match until 2024, which means 4 years of his career competing for the top prize in chess would be eliminated. And that's absolutely insane. And I really don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And, you know, I think what he's struggling with is the fact that leaving China is actually, it's feasible. That's not the difficult part. The difficult part is when you apply for a visa, you need to prove to the country that you're going to that you have a way back. And a lot of times, you don't. If you look up flights from Berlin back to China, or from a destination in Europe back to China, it's borderline impossible. Like, it takes 50 hours. There are 3 or 4 layovers, and it's not even clear what the legality is, because if you enter different countries, they might have different restrictions. It's a complete nightmare, and you just gotta feel for the guy. I'm gonna show you 4 games of his that Ding played in the year 2019, and we'll end with his game in the final round of the candidates in 2021 when he was already not eligible to play. This was his game against Anish Giri from 2019, and it was a Rogozin, so a variation of the Queen's Gambit declined, where bishop to b4 is played, and Ding is a Catalan lord. Like he absolutely crushes the Catalan. He's a d4 guy through and through. And in this game, he trades his dark scored bishop, and he puts a rook on the c-file to solidify the knight so that his pawn structure isn't compromised, although obviously he does have the option to take with a pawn anyway. And this game, and you'll notice actually he does do this regardless, because if you play rook c3, this pawn e5 move is coming. But You know, Ding's playing style is really, really solid preparation, and he has just a very fluid way of playing. He is a cold-blooded calculator. He's able to navigate dynamics within positions. He's positionally very solid. He's a disaster opponent for many people, and many people thought that he was gonna, he was going to pose the biggest threat to Magnus. And in this game, he induces Anish to commit his pawn to e4, and he has this clump of pawns. The rook and the queen stand on the queen side, and he's going to try to expand. He's going to try to play c4. He's going to try to play d5 in the future, pressuring the pawn on b7. So Anish plays knight a5, protecting it. Ding castles and begins kind of the focus on the queen side. Anish plays rook c8. Knight back to f1, bishop g6. The knight rotates to target this from a slightly different position because on d2 it was pretty passive and in the way of everything. Ding now plays queen b1. So queen b1 is an interesting idea. The point is that you target the pawn, and you're really trying to get Anish to play the move f5, to commit the pawns in front of his king forward, and then you're going to take on c5 and put a rook on d4. Now, this just looks like a weakness. Why would you put the pawn on c3 and kill off its friend in the middle of the board? Well, it's because the black position is actually very annoying to handle. Like, you can't just go all in with f4 because I take and your e-pawn is weak, right? So, what do? I memean, the center is frozen. The queen side is sort of unmovable, right? So, bishop f7 played, rook d1, rook c8, bishop b5, and he's like, take this. Go ahead. I've actually left this pawn here to die because I have bishop d7. And that pawn that I made you move a couple of moves ago, f5, becomes a liability for you. So bishop b5, very nice move. G6, and now Ding is rotating the knight once again to the f4 square, right? Bishop back to a4 to get out of the way, reinstate the pressure this way. Maybe bishop b3 is gonna come. Maybe bishop b3 is gonna come, and we're gonna transform this into a knight versus bishop game. Now watch over the next 6 to 7 moves how powerful this knight becomes versus that light squared bishop standing in the corner. He begins to expand on the queen side, c4, knight to f4, and knight to d5. Now, if Anish decides to chop this knight off, we have rook takes d5, hitting the queen, hitting the pawn, and at the end of the day, one guy pushed the pawns in front of his king, and one guy didn't, which means one guy's king is a little bit weaker. Keep that in mind. That's going to be very important. Rook c6, c5. Beautiful tactical idea. Rook takes c5 does look like a free pawn, but knight b6 hits the rook, and knight d7 hits the queen and the rook, and that's decisive. Ding uses a tactical motif to solidify a stronghold. I told you, the c-file was probably going to be where this game was decided. He brings the knight all the way into d7, and now hits the queen just before he takes, and drops back. He gives Anish a pawn, but he is now able to attack the king, and the king has absolutely no defense. My monitor recently has been going green in the middle of me recording, and it's very annoying. I think the HDMI is getting weaker. So the king is continuously hit. Now he makes a little getaway in case he wants to come in with this rook to d6, and it was on move 47. That's exactly what happened. Anish lost 3 pawns and resigned. Ding combined good preparation in the opening with positional squeeze, right? Taking advantage of one target in the center to get Anish to kind of overextend with his pawn. And then he immediately swooped in, and it seemed like Ding controlled this game on all 3 sides. He controlled it down on the queen side, which is where the game was ultimately decided. On the center of the board, right? He dominated, controlling E and D. And then Anish resigned because ultimately it was the king side. Where Ding did his damage. This is a 2780 rated player, and Ding, it seemed like, just showed up and he was a hot knife. He was a hot knife, and you know, his opponent was butter. It's just like what can you say? Just good preparation into a nice positional game that's decided with violence on the king. Later in that tournament, Ding Liren had white versus, I mean, you know this guy, Fabiano Caruana. Look at these ratings, folks. 2805, 2818. I mean, we're talking about these dudes like when they were ultra strong. I mean, they're still ultra strong, but this is great. This is Fabiano Caruana fresh off the World Championship match. This is Ding Liren looking to be the next contender, right? 2019 It's crazy. We're 3 calendar years, 2.5 years in total, but 3 calendar years removed from this period of time. This game was a standard Queen's Gambit decline. We don't have to worry a huge amount about the theory. Black takes a slightly passive approach. White has 2 center pawns versus 1, and just a very nice setup. Rook c1, maybe rook d1, maybe a3, b4. Black is trying to play c5 to equalize, and that's what he does. And Liren plays a novelty, whether or not this was his preparation or what he discovered over the board, but he plays a move here, which is b4. Now, b4 just looks like you lose a pawn, because Black can just take. You can't. You can't take, actually, because after this, your pressure over here is just too much. So, for example, knight takes b4, loses on the spot, rook takes a7, and Black can probably just resign? Maybe not. Maybe there's queen d5, rook e7, rook c2, which is wild stuff. But, yeah, Black is barely surviving, I would say, after this knight b4. I would not enter this. But maybe bishop takes before you lose on the spot, probably, to, like, queen a2 or something. I mean, you just can't possibly allow this, right? So maybe this is prep. Maybe this was preparation by Ding. b4, key queenside pawn break, and takes rook b1. So he begins pressuring Fabi over there. Bishop e5, getting the bishop out of the way of the knight. a4, so holding everything on the queen side. And the position just looks annoying. It's just constant pressure by White against this cluster of pieces, right? So Fabiano is still looking to equalize. He takes on b5 and gives away his dark squared bishop to bring the knight back in a5. So Ding has, again, control of an open file, which is exactly what he had against the niche. His rooks do very well together, and everything else is symmetrical. They both have an a-pawn, they both have e through h, they both have queen, knight, 2 rooks, but Ding is slightly better. So how is Ding going to bring this game home? Is he going to screw it up? Let's see. He transfers his knight into the middle, brings his knight into c6, second game in a row, a6. Again, queen defends the pawn, right? The a7 pawn is now a permanent target. Knight to e5 hits the rook comes back, and rook c8. Just kind of belligerent progress. I mean, Fabiano has to sit there and accept his fate of being pressured for the remainder of this game, and maybe he doesn't lose. Queen a5, f4. So Ding is okay advancing the pawn in front of his king as long as the knight in the center stays solid, and Fabi plays rook down to d2. It would have been, Fabiano could have played knight d7 here. It's a terrifying move. You cut your rooks, your queen has to guard here, you're trying to get rid of this knight. He goes for more aggressive counterplay, but now rook c7, and again, Ding combines positional pressure with pressure that's more of a tactical nature on the king. His king is safe, and it looks like the black king on h7 is safe as well. But trust me, one king is much safer than the other. The king on h2 is in a vacation home. The king on h7 is on the way to the vacation home, but about to be ambushed mercilessly by the, countering army. So, rook takes c8, rook c8, and it looks like Fabiano can finally pick up the a-pawn and breathe a sigh of relief. But the pressure is far from over. Rook a8. All right, Fabiano plays queen b7, rook b5, and now queen back to f1. It's insane because now we're in a position where Fabi's just a pawn up. So you would think he's completely in the clear. No, because f7. That knight of Ding's is just unbelievably strong, right? And he finally takes on f7. That king is either going to get hunted out of the corner, or I don't know, you're going to have to sacrifice some material in the process. So knight d7, rook d8, rook b8, takes, and queen b1 check on the king. Now, queen f5, all right? Queen b7, not taking the knight and trading into a drawn queen endgame, but even without the rooks, the queen and the knight of Ding continue to pressure, right? Knight c6, knight d6 hits the queen. Queen slides away, knight comes to e4, and you would think that you can actually take on e3, and this might be a draw. Maybe queen knight n2 versus queen n4 is just a draw, but I wouldn't want to defend this position. I mean, at the end of the day, I want a knight. King g6, knight to e8, and yeah, the king is, the prophecy is coming true. The king is going to get hunted out of the back there. e4, and Ding is building a mating net. He is preventing the black king from escaping. a5, queen d7, he gets closer. a4, and Fabiano decides to just try to hide his king and push the a-pawn, but it's just not going to work. Ding is too fast. Queen d7, this king is still very sheltered. Queen takes g7, the king runs, but at the end of the day, these 3 pieces are stronger than these 4. You are threatening to make a second queen, And yeah, I mean, the move like a3 is just too slow because you're checking at the very end of your promotion. Ding plays e7 and Fabiano resigns. Ding hunts Fabiano's king across the entire board and ultimately doesn't even have to checkmate it. It's the e-pawn who's going to promote and prove to be decisive. So these were Ding's 2 classical wins in the Singfield Cup 2019, tying him for first place with one Magnus Carlsen. You might recognize this gentleman. He is a pretty decent chess player himself. He hails from Norway. They tied for first in 2019. They probably had the best years in 2019 of their I'm saying of any top player in 2019. They probably had the best years, and they had to play a playoff to determine who was going to be the world champion, the Singfield Cup champion, which is an extremely strong tournament. All the top players in the world play there. This is their second Blitz playoff, and it was a Rue Lopez, and it was a very strange Rue Lopez. Like Black followed very basic protocol, but already the game left kind of normal territory. White never played h3, preventing bishop g4, and as early as move 12, we have a position that's just never been reached. Now, Magnus has to win this game because he actually lost the game right before this. The only reason I didn't show that game is because it was an endgame where they both had 5 seconds on the clock, shuffling for the last 40 moves, and Magnus lost on time. It's not a very productive game to show, but Magnus has to win this game to obviously not lose the, playoff. So Magnus got really aggressive on move 17 and played the move g4. I mean, in general, if you're pushing pawns in front of your king like this, you're taking some big risk. The knight is going to try to come to f5. So let's see how Ding Liren doesn't positionally squeeze his opponents to death, but deals with aggression. How does Ding deal with aggression? Well, he deals with aggression by countering on the queen side and trying to trade off one of the pieces that might be useful in the attack, and now he plays b4. The idea of b4 is that you know that Magnus wants to be aggressive, so you go to trade his queen, because obviously without the queen he can't checkmate you. Magnus doesn't trade queens with you, so you take control of the C file, right? Again, we see Ding really powerful with his rooks. Queenside space might be useful in the long run. Now we play g6. We play g6 because we don't want to allow this knight in. We also can reroute this bishop to g7, but I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen. That's more just the thing that happens in other Rue Lopez positions. So we have b3. We have queen back to b7, supporting this, and also bishop will come on this diagonal, which is a little bit more powerful, right? Knight a5, queen slides back to b8. Okay, Magnus plays queen d2. Ding now infiltrates with the rook, very well supported by the pawn on b4, and laser beaming the third rank. A3 takes, and Magnus jumps into c6 to cut the communication between the rooks. So now the rooks don't see each other anymore. You can take the pawn, of course, but that loses you a queen. So good job, you lost the queen. So we have takes, sacrificing the rook, but now bishop takes d5. And it is really difficult to outcalculate Ding Liren. Like, this guy, I told you, he can play positionally, he can calculate like a madman, he can play a perfect game of chess. And in this game, we are going to see his calculation skills on display. The queen goes to a5, Ding takes a second pawn. He is not really concerned about a trade of his bishop because the more pieces Magnus trades, the more liabilities he has, right? So he's not going to be able to attack you, and he weakened his king, so this is obviously a good trade. Now, Magnus plays g5 to remove the knight from the defense of the bishop, and Ding calculated correctly here that he can just go like this. And if you take his knight, he has queen b7. And the threat of mate is unstoppable. I mean, it's stoppable in the sense that you can play queen g2 and it's a draw. So Ding calculates here that he can take on e4, g5 because he can just give up the knight completely and the attack on the king is impossible. At which point Magnus goes, ah, crap, I can't allow that, so I have to play queen takes a6. Now we have knight d5. Bishop a7, queen c7, and at some point you can bet that this diagonal will prove to either be fatal or tell the final tale of this game. Rook c1, and Ding sacks the queen. He gets 2 rooks for it, and the king has to hide out. The only thing stopping this is this knight. So how is he going to get rid of that knight? Well, first he plays bishop c6, and the reasoning for bishop c6 is a little bit of a trap. Queen takes a3 played by Magnus. Bishop takes g5, right? Bishop takes g5, so now it's protected. And if queen takes d6, there's this. And so this knight is hit, and Magnus must have thought after bishop c5 that he is winning, because queen f8 is actually unstoppable. But Ding set a trap. He set a trap where he puts his knight in the path of the queen and the bishop, and now h1 is open, and if Magnus takes and is a move away from delivering mate, it's Ding Liren himself who will deliver checkmate on h1 because of his bishop on f4, because of his bishop on c6, a move before Magnus is able to do it. Now, that was very nice. And with this win and the win right before it, Ding actually beat Magnus in a playoff to clinch the Singfield Cup. And Ding did not have as many points as Magnus in the overall Grand Chess Tour, but he was awarded the championship, and I guess it's because of his finish in the London Chess Classic. Ding did extremely well. He won $300,000, not too bad. And that was how his 2019 ended. And as I mentioned in the opening monologue of this video, that was his final success. The Candidates 2020, he had a rough start, and I would be willing to bet he had a rough start because of quarantine, because of the fact that up until that moment he was unable to train or meet with anybody because China was in full lockdown since, I don't know, about January. I mean, I remember I was giving chess lessons in March of 2020. I was still teaching. I was going to, people's houses, and I stopped doing that right around mid-March, and that was also when the Candidates started, but the rest of the world was way ahead. And Russia shut down halfway through, so a disastrous start to 2020. And when the Candidates resumed, this is the final game of the Candidates. Now, it's important to note in this game, there is a caveat. As beautiful as this game is, Jan Nepomniachtchi had already won. So he had clinched a first-place position in the Candidates. And that's what probably made this game a little bit easier. But Ding also beat Grishuk and Alexienko right before this. So he was catching some fire, and he came up to this game with Jan with a very nice idea, f3. The point of f3 is that you know Jan is a Grunfeld guy. So, he's not going to go bishop g7, d6. He's not going to play a King's Indian. He's going for d5. The entire tactical idea behind d5 is that your knight is right here. So if I attack it, you take, and the texture, the structure of the position is determined. But f3 means that there is no knight. You can just kick the knight out of the middle, and now you have a very nice center. This is a totally different structure and a totally different style of game. And he came prepared with this idea, and Jan actually had faced this. That same year in not that same year, but in 2019, Jan had faced this particular position, but Ding came prepared with a move that's been played 2 times, like 4 times maybe. And that move is bishop d3, not developing his knights, not developing his bishop yet. And Ding chooses, watch his development, he moves the knight to e2, and then he moves it to c3. That knight takes the position of usually the other knight, which is currently back on its home square. And this knight will serve a purpose of going in another direction, maybe to c4. This knight controls b5, so there's no a6, there's no a6, b5. b5 is completely shut down, and the knight over here will find itself doing something else, right? And the other thing is, when you prepare something like this, you need to anticipate, how is my opponent going to react? If you know a player well enough, which these top guys do, you can kind of predict how they're going to play, particularly if they've already clinched the tournament. So in this game, Nepo went all out. Bishop d4, knight e5, queen h4 on the way. I mean, he is looking to just knock this opening completely out of here. He's like, no chance, right? Knight e2, queen h4. Ding is trying to untangle here and clarify the position, trade off the correct pieces. So we have knight takes d4, knight takes d3, takes, and knight g3. Yes, you might be wondering, isn't that just a winning of material? Knight takes f1. And Ding's like, yeah, but your knight is trapped. I allowed your knight in on purpose, because if you play queen takes h2, I just take your knight. And I have 2 pieces. I have a bishop. I have 2 knights for a rook. And 9 times out of 10, 2 pieces are better than a rook, particularly when the position is so far away from being an endgame. Your rooks are never going to play in this game, right? So Nepo takes with the knight on h2, but his knight is still trapped. And Ding finds a very clean way to just remove the aggressive queen. He just trades it. Now, in trading it, the knight is able to sacrifice itself for a remaining pawn, and we actually get a position where Jan took everything. Jan took all of his pawns. Like, if we just go back for a moment, he took h2, f3, and he took f3 one more time. He got 3 pawns for that knight, but Ding had calculated that this position, even with no pawns near his king, is better for him. Why? 2 knights are better than a rook. It doesn't matter how many pawns you're down. He is down 3 pawns, but where are they? These pawns can't move. d6 is a huge weakness. You're gonna use these 3 extra pawns in front of your king? I mean, black is 2 moves away from mate, okay? It's 2 moves away from mate. And Ding, right? f6 to kick, to offer up an exchange. And here Ding sacks his queen. That's called a desperado. Because if he took the queen, he would have lost his. So he sacks it first with check and goes like this. And now this is just torture. I mean, he has 2 knights for the rook. This is a huge liability. And all he has to do is consolidate. That's what he has to do, right? He gets the pawn on d6. He trades the bishop. Bishop c7. And we're going to go boop, boop, boop. Who's going to stop me? Who's going to stop me? Let me tell you something. It was not Nepo. I mean, Ding made this game look so effortless. The one critical moment where he had to calculate, knight b6 check was the deciding move. The one critical moment where he had to calculate, he completely calculated correctly, evaluating the fact that this attack, this swarm, I mean, is nothing. Just absolutely nothing. He trades the right pieces, he gives away a little bit of material, and he just understands that black has no time. Like, black is stuck. So he has all the time in the world. He gets a position which is just totally winning, stays patient, trades the queens, gets that pawn on d6, and yes, if this game was round 4 of the candidates, before Jan could relax, perhaps it would have gone differently. But this is a video of Ding Liren beating the best player in the world, the second best player in the world, and 2 of the top, the runner-up to the World Championship 2021, and Anish Giri, who at that time was probably ranked 4th or 5th in the world. I mean, this man not having an opportunity to participate in the candidates tournament is a travesty. It's insane. It's completely insane. I can't speak about the visa regulations. I don't know. I don't know what's happening. I've met folks, I know folks who have been able to leave China, but oftentimes it's about the visa of the destination. If you are able to get that clearance, oftentimes you need to apply with a to and from ticket. You need to show what your plans are, because perhaps Berlin is like, we don't know if this guy's just gonna stay here, right? Like that. So I don't know what's happening or what's been happening. Ding has not been able to play in any major event. He has also been screwed by the fact that they are not accepting a rating qualifier anymore. And the wild card of the candidates has been given to Timur Rajabov. If you don't remember what happened there, Timur withdrew from the tournament because of his concerns over the coronavirus. And they had to cancel it halfway, so to make it up to him, they let him back into the next one. But that wild card could have gone to Ding Liren, so it's just... oh, it's so rough. And not to mention the time zone issues and not being able to participate to his best of his ability in the online stuff. This video is just trying to spread a little bit of positivity and the message of the fact that chess has boomed so much in the last nearly 2 years. And we're doing it all without our superstar from China. And it really sucks. And it's terrible, and I don't know what to do about it.